Welcome to the Hockey Hub. Glad you could join us. Episode number 3. Pellerin and Judd Sirott here with you as we talk all things Bruins hockey. We'll also have some Hockey East discussion as well. Their season getting underway. Natalie Noury will join us coming up. And you may notice that Judd and I are dressed pretty well for this episode because full disclosure, we're just wrapping things up at TD Garden after the Bruins 4-3 loss to the Florida Panthers, and we head over to the Nesson studio and we do the Hockey Hub podcast. So we are looking good if you are watching us on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitch right now. Judd, how we doing?
All good, Adam. You? Like to be talking after a win, but that's okay.
Would much rather be talking after a win. And of course, the Florida Panthers have been a thorn in the Bruins' side to start the regular season. Of course, going back to the postseason last year. But, we'll talk about the good and the bad with the Bruins. But, first 4 games of the year. Judd, we had episode number 1 of the Hockey Hub podcast, and it was sort of a season preview. We taped it the night before the opener against the Panthers. Obviously, they've played the 4 games since then. They've had the 2 against the Panthers, both losses. They beat the Canadiens and the Kings at home. So I guess I'll just start off by asking you, what are your thoughts through the first 4 games of the year?
So, Adam, I almost want to echo something that Jim Montgomery had mentioned the other day, and I'm trying to remember if it was after a game. I think it was after practice, where he mentioned, I have to remind myself that it's early, and because of that, I have to stay patient because I can see that there's going to be a lot of growth that's going to need to take place with our team, and I think that that's what excites him, and that's certainly the case. I think this is I think you're going to see this with a lot of teams around the National Hockey League, and there are certainly a lot of good things that you have seen from this group. I know we're going to dive into the fourth line, and David Pastrnak scored goals in each of the first 3 games. I think Charlie McAvoy has gotten off to a strong start, but clearly there are a lot of different areas that the Bruins are going to have to address, and these things take time. But the Bruins, they were able to bank a couple of wins on home ice, which is a good thing. So 2-2 before they hit the road.
Yeah, which is a good thing. And, of course, the road trip, which we will get into, could be a galvanizing experience for the Bruins. Last year, their first trip out west went very well. It was a big part to their quick start to the year. But, yeah, it's early in the year, Judd. It's hard to get a gauge on teams this early. I mean, the Edmonton Oilers went to the Stanley Cup final last year. They're 0-3. Some of the other teams, Utah Hockey Club, they had their first loss on Monday, but they got off to a quick start. There's a lot of things that's kind of wonky about the beginning of the year, but the Bruins 2-2 so far, and we talk about the good things for the Bruins. It's certainly been the fourth line for the Bruins. I mean, it's just been outstanding. They've been doing everything right early on in the year. Here's Jim Montgomery and his thoughts on it.
Really happy with the bottom 6, like you're saying, and the fourth line has been very, very impressive.
Are they just not getting caught up in the theatrics that maybe those top guys are?
They're just doing their role. Guys in the top 6 aren't doing their role. They are doing their role.
Pretty straightforward, simple hockey is, I think, what we've observed from that fourth line to start.
That's exactly what it is here early on. I definitely want to go back and talk about the fourth line here in a minute. But, Adam, one of the things that you had mentioned, you were talking about the start that the Bruins got off to last year, and they went on an early road trip out west. And if you remember, the Bruins, I want to say they started 8-0-1 or 9-0-1, but they didn't necessarily like the way they were playing. It was the goaltenders at that point, Linus Ullmark and Jeremy Swayman, who were the number 1 stars consistently early in the season, and that started to catch up with the Bruins. So keep that in mind. Even though the Bruins got off to a really quick start last year, they didn't necessarily like the process that they were playing with. So we can dive a little bit more back into that. But when it comes to the fourth line, and I think the way you phrased it, Adam, is perfect. Straight lines. And the other thing that Jim Montgomery had talked about, certainly with Andy Brickley on the heels of the loss against the Florida Panthers on Monday afternoon, was that group is winning battles. They're playing simple. And another word that you hear around the National Hockey League all the time, being connected. What is being connected? And Brick was breaking down a replay earlier in the game, and I think it might have been on the Bruins' first goal. Johnny Beecher got it. He had cut hard to the front of the net, and the puck deflected off him after a Mark Kastelic shot. But you could see all three guys, all three forwards in the picture playing off of one another. So early in the season, it's the straight lines, winning battles, using their abilities too. Whether it's Beecher and his feet, Cole Koepke can skate, and Mark Kastelic with some of that physicality. They've combined all of those things to give the Bruins some much-needed offense here early in the season.
Yeah, they're playing fast. They're getting bodies in front. They're staying connected. It is exactly what Cole Koepke said after practice, an optional practice the Bruins had on Sunday. I mean, this is a guy that was not on anybody's radar when the Bruins signed him to a two-way deal when free agency began, but he has been a solid contributor to start the season. But, you know, in terms of the Bruins start last year and getting off to a quick start, just to touch on what you mentioned, you know, sometimes you can get caught up in the results and some of the details sort of lag behind. And, you know, because you're winning games, you know, it doesn't show up as much. But, you know, maybe, you know, with the Bruins having a 2-2 record and some of the details that are glaring right now that aren't good for the team, and because you're not winning, you know, some of these games, you know, maybe that can benefit them, you know, in the long run. But in terms of the fourth line, I just, you know, be remiss to, you know, if I didn't, you know, talk about Mark Kastelic. I mean, who saw this coming, right? I mean, this guy is, you know, obviously the trade with the Ottawa Senators, Linus Ullmark going to the Sens. You get Jonas Korpisalo. Obviously, that was the centerpiece for the Bruins in return because he is the backup to Jeremy Swayman. A lot of question marks about him going into the year. So far, we've only seen him one time because Swayman signed the deal and got the next three starts for the Bruins. But Mark Kastelic, we saw in the preseason, Judd, a physical player delivering hits. He even scored in the preseason. You're thinking, all right, that's an added bonus. But he's got 5 points in the first 4 games, a 2-goal game and a 3-assist game. He is driving that fourth line. It's been a lot of fun to watch.
He's been excellent here early in the season with the 2 goals and the 3 assists that he had against the Florida Panthers on Monday afternoon. So that's definitely a welcome sight for the Bruins. The other name that you referenced on that line was Cole Koepke, and Jim Montgomery. I know you had a chance to catch up with him the other day. One of the things that he talked about with Koepke is that it's an adjustment for him, and he does have an opportunity to carve out a niche. But one of the things that he's getting used to, this was a guy who played in a top 6 role at Minnesota Duluth, where he won a national championship. So you go into the National Hockey League, and you're trying to get to that point, but you have to succeed in the bottom 6 first to have that opportunity. But that still requires a certain level of responsibility. And thus far, he's playing that way. We really didn't talk a whole lot about Cole Koepke in particular during training camp, but he was, I don't know if I would term it a surprise, but Jim Montgomery mentioned, Adam, that he had a really good camp, and I don't think that anybody necessarily had him penciled in here in the first 4 games in playing all 4 of those games, but that's certainly the case. He can skate. He's not the biggest guy. He's not small either. I think he goes about 6'1", a little bit over 200 pounds, but he's able to win some battles. He's put himself in some good spots, and that's what allows him to stay in the lineup on a consistent basis.
Yeah, they've been winning puck battles, puck retrieval. I mean, they've been doing everything that you could possibly ask from them. You know, and you mentioned too, you know, being a top 6 guy in college and making the transition to professional hockey and then getting an opportunity in the NHL. You know, the guy that I was thinking about was Johnny Beecher. You know, Johnny Beecher out of the University of Michigan, a young guy learning how to not be the guy, right? And I think that's something that we talked about with Fabian Lysell and Georgi Merkulov in training camp, right? They're, you know, getting a lot of minutes, getting quality minutes, getting time on special teams, but, you know, getting an opportunity in the NHL as a young player that already has David Pastrnak and Elias Lindholm and some of these big names, you have to learn how to do other things to make yourself valuable. And I think, you know, Johnny Beecher is a guy that I think has, you know, to start this season, learned from his experience last year playing 52 games and has found a fourth line role where he is asked to win faceoffs. he is asked to do what he's doing right now with that fourth line, getting in front of the net, winning puck battles, but also on the penalty kill. You know, a guy that has been a valuable member of the PK, and the Bruins have been on the PK quite a bit through the first 4 games.
Well, we can certainly jump into that topic because Jim Montgomery brought it up on the heels of the loss against the Florida Panthers. But with a guy like Johnny Beecher, the other thing that comes to mind, Adam, is that if you're in a bottom 6 role, especially if you're in a fourth line role, as Beecher has been essentially here in his first season plus in the National Hockey League, you have to embrace that role. But it's also a role that he is somewhat familiar with. So he was playing on a Michigan team in college that was loaded in skill. And because of that, the Wolverines had him playing in a bottom 6 role. So this is somewhat familiar territory for a guy like Johnny Beecher, but early here in the season, he's added some layers to his game, and his best attribute by far is his skating. He's an elite skater in the NHL, and he's used that to his advantage and to the Bruins' advantage here early in the season.
So the fourth line, big thumbs up through the first 4 games of the year. Bruins' top line, been good. Been good at times, right? You know, the second line, you know, so again, you're talking about, you know, the first line is probably, right, Elias Lindholm, Pavel Zacha, David Pastrnak, probably going to stick together, you know, you would think, right? But the lines that could see some jumbling are the second and third line. And just to, you know, remind folks, second line, you have Charlie Coyle, who had 25 goals last year, almost 60 points, Brad Marchand, and Morgan Geekie on the right wing, right? And then the third line so far, you know, you've had Matt Poitras in the mix now with Trent Frederick moving over to the wing, Justin Brazeau. We had seen Riley Tufte, you know, in there as well. Judd, you know, they're not getting any offensive production, you know, from that second line in particular, right? And you expect your top 6 to sort of be driving the offense. It hasn't happened so far. So what do you expect, you know, during this West Coast trip, perhaps? Do you expect Jim Montgomery to mix things up a little bit?
I think we saw the blender started to break its way out against the Florida Panthers on Monday afternoon, and you saw some different combinations. You saw Marchand and Poitras skating together. You saw Trent Frederick slide up. Justin Brazeau's minutes have been a little scattered here in the last 2 games. So I think we're going to see some different combinations. And it used to be, Adam, for a long time in the National Hockey League, and I'm sure in a few places it's still the case, that guys would take out a cocktail bar napkin and they would start to scribble down combinations. Now, Jim Montgomery actually was joking.
We do that when we go out on the road.
Yes, early in training camp. Trust me, everybody's doing it around the National Hockey League. But Jim Montgomery likes to say, we don't draw on cocktail napkins anymore. We have their names on these magnetic boards, and we just kind of slide them around. So I guarantee that there's going to be some movement as they try and take a look to see what fits. And it's going to take some time because right now you're not getting the desired production from what had been your second line. Marchand, Coyle, Geekie, all without a goal. Trent Frederick had a goal on opening night. We haven't seen consistent production from him. Justin Brazeau's had his moments here in the first couple of games, but we haven't seen it consistently. You mix in Matt Poitras, who against the LA Kings, Jim Montgomery had mentioned that's the best game I've seen him play as an NHLer. Now, granted, he had only played like 30-plus games the game before. But I think with young players in particular, you can't have one good game, one not-so-good game, one good game, one not-so-good game. It's got to be more like 8 or 9 really good games and 1 B game. 8 or 9 more good games, 1 B game. That's what has to happen. With Matt Poitras in particular, there's an option available to the Bruins that was not available last year. At 19 years old last year, he was not allowed to be sent to the American Hockey League. If the Bruins sent him down, he would have to go back to his junior team in the Ontario Hockey League. That option of going to the American Hockey League is on the table, and I also want to make sure that we're clear on this. He's a 20-year-old kid. He is just learning the game. So if he went to the American Hockey League, and I'm not necessarily sure that that's going to take place, if that happened, that would not necessarily be a bad thing for Matt Poitras and his growth as the Bruins try and sort this out. But as they begin the road trip, that'll start in Colorado. It'll head to Utah and it'll end in Nashville. And I know we're going to talk a little bit more about the road trip. I think Jim Montgomery is going to mix and match to see what works. And at least at this point, and I think your point is a good one when it comes to Zacha, Lindholm, and Pasternak, I think he'd like to try and keep those guys together. But that all depends on how things play out here in the next couple of games.
Yeah, just 20 years old. Not only that, but missing a lot of last year after the shoulder surgery, right? He played his last game before Saturday on January 25th. So he spent a lot of the offseason, his offseason, recovering, building up, then skating, and then getting to development camp and skating, and then getting to training camp, and then getting hurt, by the way, 2 weeks ago in the preseason. And you're thinking, oh no, I hope it's not that shoulder. It ended up being something else, and he was back out on the ice. But I wonder with Matt Poitras, because, it's there, right? You see the good stuff from him and what he can do. And then I think also about mixing up the lines, and this is the job of the head coach and the front office and all these people that come together to make these decisions. There's a fine line between, all right, this isn't working through 4 games. We've got to mix things up. But also, well, wait a minute, it's only been 4 games. We should let these guys try to figure it out. And so that's the challenge in front of Jim Montgomery and the coaching staff right now.
There's a little bit of both. The other thing with Matt Poitras, if we go a little bit further on that point, so the other day against the Florida Panthers, he plays 14 and a half minutes. If for some reason the Bruins send him to the American Hockey League, he plays in all situations, all the time. Those minutes go up to 18, 19. And he gets an opportunity to develop. This is a kid who is still learning how to be a pro. And it's hard to develop at the National Hockey League level. It can happen. And this kid's got a ton of ability. The game that he played the other day against the LA Kings was terrific. And what a difference it makes in the Bruins when you have a player like that who you can mix in on your third line. Even Jim Montgomery had mentioned it makes our team so much more dynamic. But the other name that we really haven't talked about, and I don't know if we really even talked about it on the Monday before the Bruins started the season, is Tyler Johnson. He's still here. And I think I still expect that the Bruins would like to try and get him on the roster. Now, at this point, just based on where they are salary cap wise, they would need to be able to create some space. A minimum salary in the National Hockey League is, I believe, $750,000, $775,000, somewhere in there. They don't currently have that space. They can create that space. But one of the things that the GM Don Sweeney had mentioned to Tyler Johnson before he came, he said, listen, I can't offer you a contract, but I want you to be in the mix. And he's still here. After training camp is over, the preseason is over, and the season has begun. And it would not surprise me if he is on the trip with the Bruins as they depart for Denver.
I think it's a good sign that he's still here, right? Because there are 31 other teams in the league. And if there's an injury, there could be a situation where Tyler Johnson could have an opportunity elsewhere, but that hasn't happened yet. He had a good training camp. He scored a power play goal. He's a veteran. He's had 4 20-goal seasons. He's won 2 Stanley Cups. Spent the last few years in Chicago on a rebuilding team. Now with the Bruins and a team, and he wants. And I think that's part of the reason why he's still here, Judd, is because he understands the Bruins are competing now. They're trying to win now, and they have this culture in place. And he's got versatility, right? Because this is a guy that can play both center and wing. And if you haven't noticed, and you look at the Bruins forward group, there's a lot of guys that can say that. So obviously they covet that. So Tyler Johnson, could, and again, you go back to the Danton Heinen comparison, right? Danton Heinen comes here on a PTO. He ends up sticking with the team after training camp. Season starts, still here, and then signs a contract on October 30th, which is when he played his first game, ended up being a valuable member of last year's team. So you could see the same thing with Tyler Johnson this year.
No question about it. The other thing, just thinking about Danton Heinen, I remember Adam, if you remember last year, he did not play in the last preseason game for the Bruins. And Jim Montgomery was asked about it, and he said, listen, I know Danton Heinen really well. I know exactly what he brings to the table. I don't need to see him in another preseason game because he had played for Jim Montgomery at the University of Denver. And in the same way, the Bruins have seen plenty of Tyler Johnson over the years. He's played in the National Hockey League for well over a decade. He was in their division for the bulk of it, playing with the Tampa Bay Lightning. They know exactly what he brings, and they had a chance firsthand to see what he's like behind the scenes and on their own team. So they know exactly what he brings and how he can impact their roster. And if you want to talk about, okay, a lot of coaches, when it comes to lines, as we kind of circle back to that, when they put together line combinations, sometimes what coaches will do is they deal in pairs. They keep pairs together, and then they put another guy with the pair to see if they can make that trio work. So could that possibly be Coyle and Marchand, who played plenty together, with a guy like Tyler Johnson on the right? That's something that it wouldn't surprise me if Jim Montgomery looks at. Could that be Trent Frederick, who's played plenty of the offside, moving up to play with Coyle and Marchand, a guy who's also very responsible, who understands how to play center. And now you've got a guy who's a left stick and a right stick who have options at center. Could that be? I think all those things are in the mix, and all those things will be looked at on Jimmy Montgomery's magnetic board as he moves around some of those names.
Personally, I prefer the cocktail napkin myself. I think
You're not alone, baby.
Yeah, all right, good. Elias Lindholm didn't play a lot in training camp. Didn't really get to skate with his new line mates all that much. Had a baby, which was, great for his family. But in terms of, missing time, not ideal when you're in a new team. But, he stood out, in a lot of ways. And I think, I think it was the game. Yes, it was the game against the Kings. He ends up scoring the goal, obviously, but Brick, as he always does, had a great breakdown talking about Elias Lindholm and his hockey IQ, doing the little things defensively, doing the little things to find soft areas on the ice. He is a heady player, and I think that we've seen that through the first 4 games. You agree?
Absolutely. We always talk. He's kind of like Patrice Bergeron, but we don't want to put him all the way there. But he makes a lot of Bergeron-esque plays, just some subtle, smart plays, whether it's a 5-foot pass, banking things up the wall, exiting your zone, winning a face-off, tying up a guy. It's all those little details that I think here early in the season you've started to see in Lindholm's game.
Yeah, you have. And, I think that one of the things that Bruins fans and we were looking forward to seeing was him in the bumper position on the power play, right? And I think that was one of the things. Like, all right, you got this, you got a true top 6 centerman. Last year you had Pavel Zacha to start the year in the power play, in the bumper position. The left shot was going to be different after years and years of Patrice Bergeron, their quarterback, in the bumper in that power play unit. And now you got a right shot back in Elias Lindholm. But so far, Judd, it hasn't worked out. The Bruins power play, 2 for 18 to start the year. Jim Montgomery had said that he liked the power play against the Canadiens, but not so much in the other 3 games. And a lot of it, it's a combination of things. Zone entries haven't been great. The passing hasn't been as crisp as you would like. They had some opportunities on the last power play they had against the Panthers where Pasta hit the post and there was a deflection. It was a great save by Bobrovsky. But other than that, Judd, it hasn't looked good to start the year. No,
they didn't win enough battles. And you mentioned that they've scored only twice here in the first 4 games. They've also allowed 2 shorthanded goals, both to Sam Reinhart, and that's something that absolutely cannot happen. On the heels of the loss against the Florida Panthers on Monday afternoon, Jim Montgomery wanted to make sure that he pointed out that group is not winning enough battles. And even though you're a man up, the old adage is you still have to outwork the penalty killers. You have to win those pucks back. And I think once they're able to win more of those battles, I think you'll start to see some of the abilities there, because we have seen it, but we haven't seen it consistently and having a guy like Elias Lindholm as a right stick in the bumper. You've seen some movement with guys like Pasternak and Marchand. I think Charlie McAvoy has gotten off to a very good start quietly on the power play, something that I think that there's still a lot of upside in his game to grow on. But if they're able to win more battles, and I think the other thing that you had mentioned, being able to get pucks in against the LA Kings, and this is a really good defensive team. One of the things that Jim Montgomery talked about, we were slow. They have to move the puck quicker. They have to win more battles. And once they do that, I think they have enough skill, once they're in zone, that the power play will pick itself up.
Yeah, one of the positive things, too, and I think you mentioned as part of your answer talking about Charlie McAvoy, is the defensemen are looking for their shot, right? And that's something that we didn't see enough of last year, particularly from Hampus Lindholm, who's now, quarterbacking the second power play unit at times, with Charlie McAvoy quarterbacking the first one. McAvoy, that goal he scored here at TD Garden was a power play goal. It was great. It was a dart, as you put it. And that was great to see. It's great to see some of the D-men looking for their shots.
Charlie McAvoy last year, Adam, had 12 goals on the power play. That was a career high. How many did he have on the power play? One. He had 1 goal on the power play. Moreover, and we're talking about one of the better offensive defensemen in the league, certainly one of the best 200-foot defensemen in the league. This was a guy last year that put up 47 points. He was 7th also, by the way, in time on ice in the National Hockey League. Where did he rank among all defensemen last year in power play points? 30th. I think there's a ton of upside, certainly in that aspect of his game. And you can see one of the things that he had talked about is that he spent a little bit more time this summer, and he changed up some of his routine. He wanted to work on more one-on-one skill. He wanted to do less group skates and work on more that skill aspect of the play. And maybe we're starting to see some of those results. That's one of the things that Brick talked about here early in the season. And because of that, I think he's been more dangerous from the blue line when the Bruins have had the man advantage.
Mentioned the Bruins have been in the penalty box quite a bit. That's the bad news. The good news, the PK has been pretty good. I mentioned Johnny Beecher earlier in terms of the forward group getting it done. But you got to stay out of the penalty box. I think they've been obviously committing too many minor penalties, and you can't rely on your PK all the time when you're constantly in the penalty box. And your goaltender's being asked to do a lot in the process. 26
minor penalties, I believe, here in the first 4 games.
Yep.
And sometimes it's not the penalties in and of themselves, it's the type of penalties that they're taking. Are they retaliatory? Are they avoidable? Are they preventable? This was certainly an issue last year. If you look at the Bruins overall, they spent a lot of time in the PK. They took the 4th most minors in the National Hockey League last year. But even an average power play, if you look around the NHL right now, an average power play in the league scores 20% of the time. So if you're shorthanded 5 times, you're going to allow a power play goal. You got to cut those numbers down.
Yep, no question about that. So those are our thoughts through the first 4 games of the season. The last 3 have been at home, so you completed your first home stand of the year. And now, looking ahead to your first long road trip of the year, and Judd has already packed his bags. You already packed?
No, are you kidding me?
Oh, my
Somebody
goodness.
asked that the other day. No, I haven't packed yet.
Well, I mean, somebody asked that the other day. I'm asking you now. It's a lot closer.
No, I haven't packed yet. I did do laundry yesterday, which is a good thing.
All right, so as soon as Judd wraps up the Hockey Hub podcast, he's got to go home and pack. And he's got to pack for 3 cities, some cold weather cities to start. You got Colorado. You're going to be in Denver to kick things off, which is a national TV game against the Avalanche. And then on Saturday, you have a matchup against the Utah Hockey Club. Hockey in Utah at the NHL level. It's been there for years, but now for the first time, an NHL team is there. And then you wrap things up and, just a dull city, Nashville. So there's not a lot going on there. So, I mean, good luck finding something to do. But
a lot of people, by the way, are bummed. They were hoping, and I'm talking about a lot of Bruins fans that I've talked to recently, they were hoping that maybe that trip would take place a little bit later in the season so they have something to look forward to. But for the Bruins, it's their first extended road trip of the year.
yeah, it was the siblings trip a couple of years ago, if I'm not mistaken. And the Bruins went there later in the year. But, let's talk about the road trip. And, again, I think I mentioned it earlier. I mean, this is a great opportunity for the team to get away. They got some downtime in between games, whether it's practice or off days. And it's always a time, Judd, for a team to come together as a group, get away from everything, go out to dinner, get to know each other because you got some new faces on this team, and that's what this is all about.
The teams that are able to bond, and I know you hear about it all the time, but the teams that get along, really spend and enjoy spending time together, those are the teams that typically go the farthest. Yes, you have to have a lot of talent, and there are a lot of ingredients in that, but if you're able to develop that type of chemistry in your room, that usually is the harbinger of a team that has not only a playoff run in mind, but a deep playoff run in mind. So I think that'll be a good thing for the Bruins. It'll start in Denver. That is not an easy place to play against an Avalanche team that has gotten off to a pretty sluggish start. They have a ton of goals. And last year, Alexander Georgiev had to hold down the fort because that Avalanche team allowed a ton of chances against. Now, they started to get that a little bit under control, but the Bruins are going to have to contend with two of the big-time stars in the league, Nathan MacKinnon, Cale Makar, Mikko Rantanen. The one guy that they will avoid is Valeri Nichushkin, who is still an NHL player assistant, but that guy is a force. But a very difficult start to the trip for the Bruins as they play at altitude against the Avs.
Yep. So that's how they start things out against an Avs team that's just loaded with talent, even with all of their injuries and other things happening there. And then you go to Utah, Judd, and the hockey in Utah. Of course, the team formerly known as the Arizona Coyotes, now the Utah Hockey Club, led by Clayton Keller. Dylan Guenther has had an outstanding start. He just was named first star of the week as Utah got off to a 3-0 start. They lost to the Devils in a matinee, and so their first loss of the year, but. Hockey in Utah, from the outside looking in and watching it looks like it's a lot of fun so far for them.
I think it'll be terrific. And this was a team, as you mentioned, so there's been hockey there for a while, going all the way back to the Salt Lake Golden Eagles, and then for the team that Andy Brickley and Bob Beers played for in the Utah Grizzlies. They still have a team there that I believe is in the East Coast Hockey League.
Correct.
So hockey has been in and around the Salt Lake area for a while, but I love the response. Even before they played the first game, I don't know if you had a chance to watch the introductory, celebration when the transfer was made and the team came from Arizona to Utah, and it was a full house in the arena as they introduced all the players. And this is a team that Billy Armstrong, the general manager, so basically the entire hockey operations group, along with the players and the coaching staff, made the transfer from the desert to Salt Lake City. And this is a group that Billy Armstrong has been working a while to put together. A lot of young talent. You cited a couple of names. Clayton Keller, Dylan Guenther. Beyond that, there's another kid in Logan Cooley who's got 5 assists in his first 4 games. Lawson Krause, big power forward. But he also added a little bit of veteran depth, especially on the back end. He made a big surprising trade, picking up Mikhail Sergachev. He adds in a guy like Ian Cole, who's won a couple of Stanley Cups with the Pittsburgh Penguins. And he's got a really good young goaltender, Connor Ingram, who's been a great story here early in the season. This team has a lot of youth, a lot of talent, a lot of skill, and they've built up a ton of assets that are in their system that I think Billy Armstrong is going to parlay into more things that are going to help his National Hockey League team. But that is going to be a fabulous game and a fabulous setting for the second game of the Bruins road trip. And the first one that we have here on NESN.
Yeah, the first one on NESN. That's right, because the national TV game in Colorado and the first game on NESN in Utah. So we're making history this week. And when you were a young broadcaster, Judd, calling games for the Chicago Wolves in the I, you had an opportunity to go to Utah. Do you have any memories that you can share?
Just a few. No, that was it. That was a great stop on the tour. I think I've told this story in the past that I met Brick and I met Beersy when those two guys were still playing for the Utah Grizzlies, and it was a fabulous place to stop and get a chance to go to. I remember there were plenty of times where if you'd get in at the right time, you got in early enough, you could do a little night skiing. I remember going up to Brighton with a bunch of players when I was in the minors and doing some night skiing, heading to a great place. It's sort of nestled between Alta and Snowbird to grab a few burgers and some cocktails before getting ready for the game. No, it's a great place, and I was so excited to see that they were added into the mix here in the National Hockey League.
So you pack your ski boots and your snow pants. What do you pack and what do you rent?
Not for this trip.
Yeah.
Going back then.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. Did I bring my skis?
Yeah, right. You're flying yourself there.
I might have. Back then, we travel a little bit differently. Trust me.
Yeah.
In the Crabapple, my friend, there is no charter.
Yeah.
So,
No.
so I could bring my gear, and there's actually a story I could probably tell. So when I went out there, I think there were a couple of guys. This was probably when the leagues merged. So the IHL and the American Hockey League merged,
Yep.
or the American Hockey League absorbed. I want to say it's 6 teams from the I, and so we went in to play Utah because they were part of the process. They stayed in the league. This was 2001, 2002, and there were a couple guys on the team that came up to me on the plane, and they asked, "Hey, what are you doing tonight?" And I said, "I'm going skiing." They said, "We want to go." I'm like, okay, just don't tell the GM. And our goalie came with. So I was terrified that, and we're doing night skiing, which is already a little sketchy. So we did some night skiing up at Brighton, and it was a big group of players, which including the team's number one goaltender. And all I could think about was, please don't get hurt. Please don't get hurt. Please don't get hurt. But before to try and schedule this, I just said, I'm renting a car. I'll meet you in the back of the hotel. Just hop in and we'll drive up to Brighton. And that's exactly what we did. And somehow we did not get discovered. The number one goaltender did not get hurt. I don't remember if we won or lost the game afterward, but it didn't matter. We had a blast playing some night skiing.
No, that's awesome. I'm glad that devastating injury wasn't on your watch, Judge, because that might have told a different story of your career.
I was terrified. Are you kidding? I would have been left there. I would have been walking home.
Hey, quickly before we let you go, Utah Hockey Club. What's the nickname? What's the team name going to be?
I think it's going to be Yeti.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be the Yeti. It seems like that's kind of snuck out. So it sounds like that's what's going to be. And I understand that there are people who they want the franchise to get named, but I think I also understand that because the transfer happened so quickly during the summer and the team didn't have a chance to put everything together, give them an opportunity to go through an entire season, go through the proper planning, and then make the name change, put the logo and the jersey together, and they'll start with a nickname beginning next year.
Yeah, that's what the PWHL did, right? They had a year with just the city names and the Boston Fleet now. So you don't like the Utah Salt Shakers?
No, I didn't know if that was in there.
No, it's not. I just came up with it off the top of my head. So I just I wanted to test the waters before I made an official submission. So.
Yeah, I don't know how that would work with the focus groups. The other thing is the last team on that trip, that's the Nashville Predators, who've gotten off to a slow start.
Loaded up in the offseason.
I mean, some really big signings. Barry Trotz, the general manager there, adding guys like Steven Stamkos and Jonathan Marchessault, and I think lost in the mix is a guy like Brady Shea, who's a really good defenseman, both with Carolina and the New York Rangers. But that team is certainly fortified, and that will be a great game to end the trip.
Yeah, looking forward to seeing it and looking forward to hearing your call once again. Hey, great job so far. That's the other thing. I should give you a shout out. 4 games in the books, 3 on Nesson. Awesome job so far. You and Brick, it's like you've been doing it for years together.
Oh, very kind. That's all Brick and everybody in the truck.
All right, Judd Sirott joining us on the Hockey Hub podcast. We will see you next week. Have a safe trip, bud. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to switch gears now, and Hockey East is underway, and we're looking forward to seeing some of the schools taking part in some big games right here on Nesson over the course of the season. Of course, the BU Terriers making it all the way to the Frozen Four last year, back-to-back years in the Frozen Four under head coach Jay Pandolfo, and Billy Jaffe caught up with him.
And not just the NHL, college hockey already is up and revving its engines. Jay Pandolfo, head coach, Boston University. Pando is always phenomenal to see you. We've seen each other at the rinks, the smaller rinks already a little bit. Let's talk BU. Let's talk your season ahead. I know you've had just one game so far. You've got another game coming up, Union, on Friday, and on Monday as we air this, getting set for your UConn game in Hockey East. What are you looking for out of your team this year and expectations? Let's just start with that.
Yeah, I think we have high expectations. We'd like to, the first goal always is to have a great regular season, so you put yourself in position to make the NCAA tournament. That's the number one thing that you're trying to achieve. I like our team. We're a little younger than we have been in the past couple of years. So even from the start of the preseason here, it seems like we, as a coaching staff, we've done a lot more teaching, a little bit more hands-on type of things, getting guys to understand how we want to play structurally, different things, whether it's breakouts or D-zone coverage, all those sorts of things. We probably stress that a little bit more than we have in the past, but that's part of it when you have a young group, and especially our back end. Our back end is really young. Really freshmen and sophomores for the most part. Braden Angam from Lowell's a grad senior, so he probably has more games combined than the rest of our D-corps. We're pretty close to it.
That's crazy. I know, and it's also, I know you're younger, but you also lost one of the most dynamic players in the back end to the NHL in Lane Hudson. And, another young player in Macklin Celebrini. Not only youngest in all of college hockey. So not only you have young guys, but you're also giving up some major talent. And I know that it's happened before and you try and replenish and all, but how do you counteract that? Do you change a little thing of what you do here or there? Because those 2 players in particular, Jay, were very dynamic, very special players.
Yeah, no question. They had a huge impact on our team last year. Lane for 2 years, but we've got some pretty good guys that are freshmen this year that can maybe alleviate some of the loss of those 2 guys. You got Lane Hudson's brother Cole, who looks pretty similar to his brother and can do a lot of similar things and can help us in a lot of the ways Lane did. And then also with 2 guys like that, you rely on them a lot, and maybe some guys don't get certain opportunities. So I think this year it's going to be a little bit more by committee, and maybe you see some guys that get a little bit more opportunity step up in certain ways. And that's what we're looking to see. Game 1 was a little indication of that. I think we got, a lot of production out of all 4 lines. So it was nice to see that, because you need everyone to win at this level, at any level. But I think the depth of our team is still really good.
Does it change the personality of your team, though, not having those guys? And I guess every year every team has perhaps a little different personality, but can you feel it? Can you notice it a little bit?
Maybe a little bit. And then too, the other thing in saying that is, when guys see those 2 guys, they expect that they're going to carry the load a lot of the times, and maybe it's nice not to have that, where you can expect more from other guys. So maybe a little bit that way, where I think this group knows that, everyone has to contribute. Not that they didn't last year, but maybe a little bit more so when you lose 2 guys that are now playing in the National Hockey League. As
you take a look around Hockey East and you kind of do your early season scouting or prognostication, so to speak. What do you think about the league? Who do you look to? I know there's a team a couple of miles away, I'm sure, that you look at regularly, but what other teams as well besides BC are you looking at and saying they could create some problems this year in Hockey East?
I think, again, it's another really strong year for the Hockey East teams. I think everyone's gotten better. So I think that's it's going to be a challenge again. Every night's very difficult. I don't know if I can pick one team. I guess maybe Providence has added a little bit more offense. They have a couple of freshmen that are really talented offensively. So I think that's going to help them for sure. But I think, like I said, I think all the teams have improved.
All right, as we wrap this up, most importantly, how are the youth teams doing? You got to play hockey coach for young guys as well before you get into being head hockey coach of the BU Terriers.
Yeah, I enjoy seeing the younger players. I have a 2014. That's how people talk about hockey, right? They talk about birth year. So I have a 2014 son that plays. I have a daughter who is a 2012 that plays, and I have a son that's an 09 that plays. So I basically spend all day, every day in the rink, but I'd rather be nowhere else.
That's a labor of love there, what you're doing there, and that's outstanding. Pando, listen, we're going to talk to you throughout the season. We'll have more in particular stuff or specific stuff to talk about as your team gets going. Again, big game coming up on Friday night against UConn as you get into the Hockey East, and we look forward to seeing you and covering you guys during the season.
Thanks, Billy. Great catching up, bud.
You too.
All right, that was BU head coach Jay Pandolfo and his conversation with Billy Jaffe, looking ahead to the Terriers season, which is already underway. And with that, we welcome in our Hockey East reporter, Natalie Noury, joining us. Hi, Natalie.
Hi, Adam. It's great to be with you. We were just saying I see you all the time, but I don't really get a chance to sit down and chat with you about hockey or anything like that. So great to be here. Great to see you.
Yeah, we need you. We need to talk Hockey East, and we need to talk BU Terriers. And you heard Jay Pandolfo talking about his team, talking about it being a young team, a lot of turnovers. Says he's doing a lot more teaching now because of the young players he has. Yet the Terriers are 2-0 to start the year, and they're the number 3 team in the country. So why are they ranked so high?
Yeah, well, you know what? In a way, some people might say, why are they ranked so low? Because they came in last year at 1. But I think there was a lot of hype that kind of surrounded them. You had Macklin Celebrini, you had Lane Hudson coming back, you had Matthew Caron coming back. So you just kind of knew there was going to be a lot of production from a lot of high-profile players, and I think a lot of people were excited about that. And so last year they were coming in at number 1 because of that reason, and for good reason too. We saw on the ice, but this year it's kind of interesting because you had the top 3. You've got Denver, you've got Boston College, and then you have BU. And I think you could kind of toss a coin between the 3 of them and pick which one you think is best because they're all so good in their own ways. But I think Denver coming back at number 1 kind of makes sense because obviously the national defending champion there, what they're bringing back, they have their top 2 goal scorers, Jack Devine, they have Zeev Buium back, combined 38 goals over 100 points last season. So them coming back for Denver, I think it's obvious that they're going to be number 1. Boston College, between what they're bringing back and what they're bringing in, I think they're going to have a very exciting season. They might even, in a way, kind of surpass how they were last year because now you have the Hagens brothers. Gabe Perreault comes back, Ryan Leonard, Jacob Fowler, Eamon Powell. So you have a lot of experience coming back, but you also have some more of those high-profile players. But, as you mentioned, BU, they're a young team, but I think even losing some key players, there's a lot of optimism with the new players coming in. They're still very good, still a lot of talent, and people want to play at BU. So, like I said, you can kind of toss a coin and kind of figure out where you want to put those top 3, but BU being at number 3, I think it's just kind of like default at that point, but there's still, a high profile team, one to look out for.
Yeah, no question about that. And you mentioned some of the turnover. I mean, it's amazing that BC, they've had turnover as well. Some of their top player, Will Smith, obviously you talked about that freshman line of last year for Boston College. And as far as BU goes, Macklin Celebrini, number 1 overall pick, 18 years old and already playing with the San Jose Sharks. And another player, and we had talked before we started. Lane Hudson, who was on the back end for the Terriers for a couple of years now with the Montreal Canadiens, had a big contingent apparently at the Garden watching him, which is pretty cool. The BU Terriers there. As far as the current roster is concerned, I know there's a younger Hudson now, Cole Hudson on the back end, and Jay Pandolfo, you heard him in his interview with Billy Jaffe, says pretty similar, a lot of similar things to his older brother Lane.
No, you're right, and I think that's kind of a funny point to bring in. Not brothers, obviously, but Jay Pandolfo has talked about not only are they playing the same, but same kind of mannerisms. I feel like they kind of both have the same kind of stoic look too. But you see Cole Hudson on the ice right now, and you're like, wow, it doesn't even look like he's an 18-year-old playing right there. The way that he's able to kind of jump up in the rush, contribute to the offense. I think already in 2 games he has 1 goal, 1 assist, 9 shots on net in 2 games as well. So there you go. He's not afraid to shoot the puck there, and that's really going to help too, because when you think about defense in today's game, you can't just rely on the top 3, your forwards, to make that happen. So having a player like Cole Hudson, I think, is really going to help them out. Obviously, he's young, and Pandolfo kind of talked about the whole teaching part of this, and I think he did emphasize the D-core being on the younger side. But I think Cole Hudson is a player to start with when you look at the direction this team is heading and should head in a way too, because I think he can just provide a lot to the offense, and he can create these opportunities that the offense can finish. And it's fun. The fact that you lose Lane, but you gain Cole, I think that's great. And you can't forget Quinn Hudson either. I think he's another one to look for this year. He's just so solid. He's on the first line right now, or this past weekend, I think he was with Shane LaChance and Ryan Green. So the 3 of them, returners, all wearing letters this year. I think that's really great to see them. But yeah, both Hudsons being on the roster is great. I think another one you can look for is Cole Yzerman.
Yeah.
What's really cool about that story, in my personal opinion, I went to school with his older brother, Shane Yzerman, at UNH. So I remember him. He was always a great player there. But Cole coming in was kind of a cool story for Hockey East, just because he switched his transfer from being with Minnesota, the Gophers, to being at BU. It said in articles he wanted to play closer to home, but that's the beauty of it, is you don't have to go too far from home to play in good, high competitive hockey. And BU is the answer for him, and I think he's going to be a huge addition for this team. He's a goal scorer. He played in the World Juniors this year. In 7 games, he had 9 goals, 1 assist, won a silver medal, so he knows what it's like to play in those high games along with Cole Hudson. But yeah, you don't want to give him time and space. I think, him up front, I mentioned Shane LaChance. I think he's taken steps in the right direction. He's dishing off assists to whoever can finish them, scoring his own goals as well. But a couple other freshmen that Pandolfo mentioned might not receive the conversation, but should, eventually they will make their own impacts, is, 2 centers, Bednarik and Svoboda. They're freshman centers. They're solid on the dot. They're playing between, at least on the third line. I thought the third line was really great to watch this past weekend. You had Bednarik between Jack Harvey and Jack Hughes. So there's some experience there, and you could see Bednarik just plays a really mature game. He puts the puck on net, and the Jacks can crash the net and just kind of finish it off. So it's really fun to watch them, and I think there's going to be some big names to take a look at.
Yeah, and just talking, you're talking about some of the players and some of the youth on this Terriers team, and thinking Shane LaChance, is a co-captain. He's a sophomore, and it's the first time in BU's history that they've had a sophomore co-captain, which is pretty remarkable. And it just sort of speaks to how young this BU Terrier team is. Well, Natalie, before we let you go, what are you most looking forward to covering Hockey East this year?
Oh my gosh, Adam, that's a loaded question. I have no idea.
Keep it under 2 minutes, though.
I know, right? I know. No, it's exciting. I think what's most exciting is watching these players come in and develop. So I think, BU, BC last year was a highlight for a lot of people. That will be a highlight again for us to watch. I'm a UNH alum, so I try not to be too biased, but I always like to watch how those teams develop. But yeah, you know what? I'm excited for the women's bean pot again, because, they took strides last year with the TD Garden, and I think kind of gave women's hockey a pep in their step. So I think there's a lot of things to be excited for. But yeah, even Providence College, I think they're looking good this year. I think Pandolfo said the same thing, so we'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, looking forward to the season, and looking forward to you coming on and talking some Hockey East with us. We really appreciate your insight, talking about the BU Terriers today as they get their season underway. So Natalie Noury joining us for the Hockey Hub podcast. Judd Sirott, of course, was on earlier. We thank you both, and we thank you for listening. listening as well. And remember, you can listen wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you want to watch the vodcast, go ahead and do that too. YouTube, Facebook, and Twitch is where you can find it. For everybody who appeared on the podcast, I'm Adam Pellerin. We'll see you next time. Andy Brickley will be on Thursday as the Bruins continue their road trip out west. We'll see you then.